Hello, this is Jim Schaefer, executive producer and host of Rip Rap, the academic book television program. My guest today is Randall Baier,
Nice to be here.
and we're going to be talking about some of the books we received at Rip Rap for review. Welcome to Rip Rap.
Well, thanks, and I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be a real surprise because,
That's right.
in contrast to your usual, at least you tell me the titles, today I know nothing other than the first book.
Well, I figured that this first book is one of your strengths, which is social media. It's by Dave Evans. It's on social media marketing, but it raised a really interesting question because my own concern about social media is that you can get lost in the onslaught, the flood of information. And so he has a very disciplined approach toward this, where he's saying that for an hour a day you plan this out.
Right.
But he raises also the question of understanding your audience, and that's the kind of theme for this program, is this thing about being aware of the people you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But still with social media, and that's quite an interesting question because, like I said, you can get lost in the universes and galaxies and so forth of, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter.
You can, and there's this critical kind of mass approach, who's using what and how many people are using, the latest things. So we've transitioned sort of from the use of MySpace to Facebook, and now a lot of people are using Twitter. You can tell in the marketing approach and this and that. But there are, for every one, well, Twitter I guess is unique, but Facebook, there are many like Facebook, social networking, communities that are good software. They're sort of like the beta tape issue with Sony. It lost out to VHS, which is one of the technology sort of things in technology history. But there are so many different resources available for sharing pictures, for sharing video, for creating material, blogging, and so forth, that it really is, in some cases, hard to sort of lock in on a few that work. There's a program that I think maybe this 1 hour a day approach might be related to a program we've used, or a technique we've used in education, a concept called 22 things. And I don't know where the 22 came from, but 22 things to learn, one each day for 22 days. And first of all, you'll sign on to email and request. This is for people who have no knowledge of technology, as well as some of the more sophisticated things. So you get a blog to send you information from, say, your favorite news feeds. And then you do something else, or you open a certain type of account and upload a picture. And over time, after you do these things, you get into more skilled sort of operations on technology. But what you pointed out is really critical. I mean, you've got a few things that are essential. One is know your market, and the other is content is still king. You still need people to write, and you still need people to investigate and put content out there, no matter if it's a 140 character message, or if it's a blog with some sort of considered opinion, say like Juan Cole's blog about the Middle East, or even a cooking blog where people discuss the sort of the anthropology of food or something of that nature, and share it. So you really do have to know the market, your market.
Well,
so to
when
speak.
the internet began, it was used very specifically for research and business. I mean, you knew exactly the person you're sending to.
Mm-hmm.
As it evolved, then it became more difficult to know who was the audience. That sometimes you can send out these mass emails that
Right.
would land wherever. And that's what intrigued me about this, is because it's not just marketing. It's starting to look at the social media as a dynamic, as an entity in itself. And one of the ways that he suggests that you can start understanding the audience is by using a touch point map, so that you start marking where are the responses coming from and who's responding.
Yes.
And why and for what purpose and what are the issues are they raising. So that starts a different way of perceiving and cognitive recognition
Yes,
about
right.
what's happening,
Right.
which I thought was really fascinating. And what channel did they use? Did they use blogs or Facebook?
Right. I guess knowing the type of social networking tool that works best for your task is an art. I mean, to
Yeah.
know who will spend the time. I mean, some people will read blogs, others want just quick information, and there's a balance of especially the mapping is actually a new development, location in space, and identifying that kind of spatial aspect to information is now developing seriously because the computers are fast enough and can give you real-time information in a sophisticated way. To something as mundane as finding out, where the traffic congestion is on your way home through your little, handheld device, to more more involved kinds of things
And then
that
he
take
talks
research.
about using social feedback
Hmm.
as a cycle. In other words, you're starting to see what's the pattern, who's responding and why, and then he starts talking about organizing how you're responding, by data, by channel, by function. This really
Interesting
intrigued me
points,
because
yeah.
now it's starting to talk about strategic interaction
Yeah,
with what's
right,
going on.
right.
And then and organized by customer. In other words, who's the specific person, by stage, and then you evaluate and rank your data. And so what I like is this is starting to evolve as a very thorough process for not only identifying audience, but identifying how you're going to react to them, and then building what he calls a social media campaign. But what's fascinating is now there's software that's available that aggregates all the different feeds into one
Yes,
central point.
because
And
there are
that was
so
the
many.
thing, yeah.
Well, I came across a new piece of software the other day called GIST, G-I-S-T. Get the gist of it. The whole point is to aggregate, as you the term you used, your different types of online identity places. Like you may have a Facebook account, you may have a Twitter account. In the professional world, people use programs such as LinkedIn or academic.edu to sort of give their online CVs and information of that nature. Well, you could have 5, 6, 7 of these things, all with a slightly different
Yeah.
purpose. Well, this software integrates that, aggregates that together, and then finds people with similar interest, websites and blogs with similar topics that look similar to what your aggregated CV network is. So you can find a lot of information about your professional area
And
or
you
your
can
interest
manage
area.
the interaction.
Correct, right.
You're not only identifying
Filter
the
it
audience,
to some degree.
Yeah, you're not only identifying the audience in fairly, precise fashion.
Yeah,
But then you're managing what you're doing
Yeah.
with it and how you're going about it, and then he has a thing
Mhm.
on the metrics, on how you measure it,
Mhm.
all that stuff.
It's also come up recently. I just had a recent discussion about academic book publishing with another faculty colleague of mine. And academic book publishing is in some pretty serious trouble because the reliance of libraries to, especially in some pretty advanced fields, linguistics, for instance, they have traditionally have had very expensive books that a certain layer of libraries will buy. But now the books, the pricing models and the publishing, the hardcore paper publishing, has almost started to price itself out of purchasing. So this group of books that maybe a group of libraries that will sort of pay the bill, so to speak, the bread and butter, those resources are diminishing. So one thing that's come about is how do you integrate a network around a publication? Multimedia files, videos, discussions with authors, or perhaps more visual media, plus a network of scholars who may be using those resources. And it all sort of comes through the publisher's website. That's one effect that this has had, in the academic publishing world, because in some ways the model of producing paper copies, hard identities like what we're looking at here, needs to be enhanced in some way to just keep it economically feasible, viable.
Well, that's what, like I said, what fascinating about this, it had to do with cognition, it had to do with perception, and had
Mhm.
understanding where you are and what you're looking at and how you get it. It was fascinating
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
interesting. You were looking at this in slightly
Yeah,
different ways. I'm looking at it as kind of the practical, how do you do it? And you're
yeah,
looking at it as a kind of conceptual, almost a philosophical, what does it mean in
yeah,
terms of
because
the
now they're
shift here?
starting to understand social media
Yeah.
as a, I don't know, anthropological or
Hmm.
sociological construct of how people
Right.
organize themselves.
Yeah, and how we think. Yeah.
But that's the key, is how we think.
Mm.
And what's fascinating to me is one of the impacts of technology, sometimes it causes us or stimulates us to think in different ways. And there's been research on that, but it just caught my fancy about this thing about the cognition. And so, for example, in this book by Edward Hollis, The Secret Lives of Buildings,
Oh, what a great title.
it carries over that way. And
Yeah,
this is a
yeah.
pretty serious, Edward Hollis is an architect and designer. He teaches at the Edinburgh College of Art
Hmm.
and was trained at Cambridge and Edinburgh universities. But he's taking a look at some pretty, famous structures and points out how buildings are forced to adapt at each succeeding age. And to survive, they must become shapeshifters.
I just had a talk with a designer, just this over the break between the year here, 2009, 2010, who worked for years as an architect, and he had a church, a local church, a town church in Vermont had burnt down halfway. They were going to redesign it. And he talked about the pew. He had a long sort of thing about the pew, the permanence of the pew in the New England, well, in any basic church. They dispensed with pews. This is a community of 35 regular churchgoers. This is a very small church, and they redesigned it to sort of look historical. But they didn't put in pews. And now what it's become is a multifunctional kind of community center. I mean, many churches serve as a community center. But because of the absence of these upright, not so much the fact that you sit upright, but they're permanent pieces of structure that don't allow you any other movement. So now they have movable chairs and a space that's an open space. So you have dinners, you have dances, you have public meetings. You can form a circle when you don't have that many people coming in on Sunday, and everybody doesn't have to sort of crowd up in the center, in the front, and you have a whole empty hall of these permanent seats. So that's
The chaplain
something
in our
related.
church, they took the pews out.
Uh-huh.
And so when they want to have a service, they have folding chairs that face one way, and then when they want to have meetings, they bring in a table and they reconfigure it. And so the space is much more multifunctional.
I mean,
And
he's written an enormous tome on the topic, but that might be one surface level
think about
indication of
the
what
Berlin
going on.
Wall was a very solid demarcation between East and West Germany.
Right, right.
And so after it got smashed and bulldozed, now they have things that are almost precious relics of the wall that are treasured
Yes.
because of what they represent.
Because of what they represent.
The liberating thing, and they just had celebrations of the
Yeah,
anniversary of the
right.
taking down
That's
of
right,
the wall.
the 20-year
Yeah.
anniversary.
And so that's an example of how
Exactly.
something that was one thing then became something else.
Yeah.
And the Parthenon was a temple that was for centuries a working church, then a mosque. And the Cathedral of St. Notre Dame was restored to a design that none of the original makers would have recognized.
Very interesting. Now that I didn't know. That's very interesting.
So it's this how and what I liked also was the stories. I mean, but they were responding to the people in their lives of what use they wanted to make of it. Even these things that look permanent.
Right. Well, I think to New York City, there was a recent New Yorker cover, nighttime, sort of winter, looked very holiday-ish because of the red and green lights on the street. But it was, the focus of the building was the night lights of the Chrysler Building, which I think since 9/11, the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building, but the Chrysler Building in some way has taken on a new kind of spiritual identity for New York. I mean, you know, it has that wonderful 30s Art Deco design and shape, but it seems to have a new life, a new kind of meaning to the city, tragically because of the destruction of the, not entirely because of the destruction of the Twin Towers, but I think in some way it's gone back to a new kind of use of or understanding of the building.
But I just love these stories about how even things that you think could not be changed because they're so big,
Yeah.
so massive,
Right.
it took so long to.
And
Well, I read
they're like
about-
a permanent.
There's a cathedral in France they're going to demolish. It took them a long time
500 years maybe to build.
to build it for a parish of maybe 900 souls.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's been so abandoned that and it's in such bad shape. Even though it has elegant architecture, nobody took care of it.
Mm-hmm.
They put a fence around it because there's so many things falling
It
off.
might
of
collapse. Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
And
right.
so they're going to demolish the whole
And you
thing.
certainly can't rebuild it, a Romanesque cathedral or whatever.
No,
Do you know
it'd
which
take
one?
too much. It's,
Well, on the other hand, they finally finished, I think in the late 70s or mid 80s, the Cathedral of St. John in New York with stonemasons, who, you know, almost replicas of the guilds who built the cathedrals in the beginning. And they built it in the old way, cutting stone, fitting stone. It was real, you know, and kind of the old style with modern technologies of building, but they got that building finished, that cathedral.
what's interesting is they have a quote, or he has a quote, Hollis does, from Victor Hugo, who's talking about Notre Dame. And he said, "Great buildings like great mountains are the work of centuries. Often architecture is transformed while they're still under construction. They proceed quickly in keeping with the transformation. The new architecture takes the monument as it finds it, is encrusted on it, assimilates it to itself, develops it as it wants. The man, the individual, and the artist are erased from these great piles, which bear no author's name. They are the summary and summation of human intelligence. Time is the architect, the nation the builder."
It's really something.
Isn't it?
Well, it must have
fascinating?
taken hundreds of years to build. Well, Notre Dame was sitting for many years without being finished, and then so what was it? I don't know. Must have been 400 years, maybe more, to build that cathedral. I don't know enough about the history of that cathedral.
Yeah, but I just liked how they, and there's other examples, but you know, we talked about the
Yeah.
Venetian in Las Vegas.
The replica, the retro.
Right.
So what is the link now to the social networking?
Because it's understanding who the people are and how they shape the message and their environment and their existence.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work to figure that out. It isn't what you see on the surface isn't necessarily what's happening or represents the history of that project.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of discipline to dig through that, you know, bit by bit. And so that's what fascinated me. Or the Western Wall in Jerusalem, you know, that's a huge problem, you know, that a lot of people don't understand. And then going along with the cognitive thing, there's this book, Strange Concepts and the Stories They Make Possible. This is actually a genre of research on cognitive culture.
Okay.
And it's the same thing. It's about looking at chasing personal essences across national literatures. And it's the same thing. When you look at national literature, you think, oh, I know what that's going to be. And he's saying in the title of the first chapter is, but what am I then? If you're not this easily, you know, presented profile.
You mean in the sense that, say, Gunter Grass represents, or Franz Kafka represents the, you know, national literature of pre-war.
Well, if I'm not this easy answer,
Europe,
then what am I?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yes,
You know,
right.
getting away from what they call the essentialism. You know, we want to easily package things up. And so I found that also interesting. Why robots go astray, or the cognitive foundations of the Frankenstein complex.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, even the aberrations, the deviancies.
Well, there's, in our own modern cinema, there's no end of this kind of thing in science fiction.
Well,
The HAL
Avatar,
computer,
the new
and
movie Avatar.
yeah, which I haven't seen, but
It's a 3D thing, and it's
Mhm.
built all.
Mhm.
And what people have been telling me is that I guess there's a television program called Avatar, and that's not this
a
Avatar.
different thing. Yeah.
So I
yeah.
mean, it's a science fiction thing. It's 3-dimensional. It's supposed to be very radical. It's already earned $1.2 billion in the world in 17 days. But they talk about how Isaac Asimov says the Frankenstein complex is mankind's gut fears that any artificial man they created would turn upon its creator.
Asimov, Isaac Asimov. Yeah.
Asimov.
Who was a great science fiction writer in his own right. The point being that the reflection of the author is can be certainly turned around in certain ways. I mean, I'm thinking of in the cinema of the 2001 Space Odyssey, or
Yeah,
I guess Alien to
if you
some
don't
degree.
understand what's going on, it could turn on you.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's this whole issue lately about what is human.
Hmm.
The cyborg and Avatar,
Well, it was,
completely fictional.
yes, right.
And they talk about in this book about Shira, whose body is almost completely free of biotechnology, except for a retinal clock built into her cornea. So, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff. And some species of nonsense,
I just had a talk with a colleague who is very interested in doing a seminar on what he calls the post-human. And I mean, I'm fascinated by this. Here I am on your show. I can't explain the post-human to you, but it's beyond this idea that we've become cyborgs. We have we wear medical technology. I mean, we're not $6 million people, but we have pacemakers, we have hip replacement.
Thanks for being a riprap.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to next month or the next 6 weeks coming in again and reviewing some more with you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Jim Schaefer, the host and executive producer of RipRap, the academic book television program. And what I'd like to do right now is to share with you how our unique and historic television series can use academic research to bring exciting, vital insights into important topics that affect our everyday lives. What kinds of topics? the politics, and other dynamics that produce the gasoline from foreign countries for gasoline in the cars we drive. The way we care for ourselves and our family. Our sense of fashion. The ways we are attracted to other people. The media we use. And the ways that the media use us and shape our lives and what we think about, and even what we remember and dream about. Plus, the quality of food we eat, the music we listen to, so, who are we? First, let me explain our name. We quickly decided that we needed a one-word title, like many of the popular television programs that were being broadcast as we started up. Like The Tonight Show, The Today Show, and the famous Bonanza Show. We liked the word Rip Rap, both for what it is and what it is not. Our program is definitely not a rip, as in some kind of vicious attack, nor a rap, meaning some sort of extended monologue, sometimes set to music. Instead, we wanted to concentrate on the word rip-rap itself, in the way the poet Gary Snyder uses the concept of rip-rap in his work as a construction of words deliberately set before the mind in space and time. And over the years, we've discovered that a wide range of people, including scholars and serious readers in the wider community, enjoy the topics we discuss. So we see our program as encouraging people to explore academic research because it's based on solid work. And over the years, we've discovered that a wide range of people, including scholars and serious readers in the wider community, enjoy the topics we discuss, such as bioethics and what to do with the fertilized embryos when the parents no longer want them, and the heart-wrenching struggles of people who try to use reproductive technologies to offset infertility, and the AIDS epidemic and its shattering impact that it's had on the lives of millions of people around the world, the nursing shortage, and how wonder drugs like Prozac affect the ways that we shape the narratives of our lives, and the questions that science raises about issues like global warming, and even the sports we watch and play. So that's a part of the Rip Rap story. We're creating history as we bring serious academic research into the public discourse.